often when talking about freedom and about surveillance in particular. I find myself in disagreement with people who seem either not to understand the principles at stake or that they just don't care. More than I would like, I find myself saying something self-defeating like, well, you should care. This never works, but instead just makes me seem finger-wagging superior and consequently less likely to be listened to. So I decided to approach this long form with this question. How do I get you to actually want freedom? It's a serious question. I mean, imagine you're a normal bloke. Let's say you're 30. You've got a good job and your career is on track. Maybe you've just had a promotion. You've got a nice living girlfriend and you're thinking about her long term. She's got a good job too, so you've got a tidy sum coming in every month. You've got a nice flat, you're leasing a brand new BMW. You're putting money aside which offsets the loan and the credit card debt, so you're not worried. You're off to the Maldives in the summer, so you're looking forward to that. Life is not exactly easy, but it's not exactly hard either. All in all, you're pretty sorted, or at least on the way to it. You don't really think about being free because you feel that you are. After all, you live in a free country. Everyone is free in Britain, aren't they? Why should you be concerned about freedom? You feel free because there's nobody following you around telling you that you can't have the things that you want, like the nice flat, the BMW and the holiday in the Maldives. And in any case, you're not really interested in politics. You live in a free country like you always have, and it's just not a concern for you. You're also a thoroughly modern Millie and fully embrace the new technologies. You've got the latest iPhone on a monthly contract with unlimited data, plus an iPad and PowerBook laptop, but no desktop for you, nor any landline. The future's mobile, man. And anyway, you can use your television to go online if you want. After all, that's how you watch telly, just by streaming Netflix. You use Uber whenever you need a taxi, so much better than minicabs. Who uses those anymore? You do your banking online on the move, you use contactless payments wherever you can, or even you pay with your phone. You can turn on your central heating remotely using your phone, along with your shower and your oven, and you use any and all devices, apps and time-saving shortcuts offered. And even if there isn't an app to remove your labour from the task, you instead subcontract it out to someone else. You do your supermarket shopping online, so in effect somebody else does it for you. And Amazon means that you never have to schlep around the shops for a birthday present, ever again. And you feel no downside. On the contrary, you feel there is no downside. The only downside is an intellectual one, even if it's that. And you're only vaguely aware of that because of somebody else telling you about it. So what's the problem? You live an exciting, comfortable and varied life, which is increasingly being made less mundane, less uncomfortable and less everyday by the wonders of technology. All those boring tasks, which you hated doing anyway, have now been eliminated, leaving you more time to do the things you really want to. But the truth is, I really don't know what to say to you, because it seems, to me as well as to you, that any and all of my warnings to you and my suggestions to you to concern yourself with what seems like the purely abstract and nebulous notion of freedom will inevitably make your life slower, more inconvenient and more mundane. Why would I do that? And why would you listen? It's at this point, whilst writing the script for this post, that I've had to stop, go away from my computer and really, and I mean really, think about this. Because it's not obvious. It's not obvious at all. And not only is it not obvious, it's also quite counterintuitive. For instance, how does using cash increase your feeling of freedom? Why would making a separate and time-consuming visit to the cash point make you more free, particularly since cash points are disappearing at an alarming rate? In fact, that unnecessary journey might rob you of half an hour that could have been spent more enjoyably. In bed, watching the telly, getting to the wine bar half an hour earlier so you can get a seat by the window. The fact that my suggestion has robbed you of 30 minutes, you might reasonably think has made you less free, rather than more so. After all, isn't that why they send people to prison? To quite literally rob them of their time. Quite. You see, this ain't easy. It isn't easy trying to get people to care for things they don't think they need, or will need. How can I convince you that freedom is something that you'll need? Well, I don't know, but I'm going to give it a shot. So, my young fictitious friend, let's start with something I know you care about. Your money. When you do your wonderfully convenient internet banking, do you use a password? Of course you do. And why is that? So that only you have access to it, right? That is, of course, only prudent. But what is it that you are protecting it from? Criminals, right? Criminals and con merchants and swindlers and hackers. And why wouldn't you? And I imagine the contents of your bank account bestows upon you a fair amount of, well, what exactly? Status, prestige, confidence, self-respect. I'm not judging, really I'm not. After all, if you are anything like the inventive person I've described, you're already more successful than I've ever been. No, it's perfectly reasonable for your relative affluence, honestly gained, to contribute somewhat to your sense of self. After all, it's your money. You worked for it. It's not the only measure of a man's worth, and it's not the major one. But it is one, and you can be pleased with yourself that you've managed to scoop up a reasonable chunk of it for yourself. But it's not all that you are, is it? It's surely not the sum total of your intrinsic worth. I should hope it isn't, for a whole host of complex psychological reasons, but also because your financial health, along with your financial independence, doesn't actually give you the financial security you think it does. In fact, whether you know it or not, it's actually hanging by a thread, and it's not up to you whether that thread holds or whether it breaks. And I'll tell you why. Leaving aside for the moment the universal truth that there is nothing online that, given enough time and enough effort, cannot be hacked, since that's the same for everyone, we'll just focus on the ways in which the solidity of your financial bedrock isn't all that you might imagine. Because you may imagine yourself to be self-contained, and maybe even self-made to some extent, that you alone are the master of your own destiny, and that it is your decisions alone that will determine your prosperity and your wider life. But you'd be wrong, because your prosperity, along with your physical freedom, are conditional. They're conditional on your behaviour, and even on your potential behaviour. For the purposes of this argument, we have already established that you are not political. Perhaps you are even apolitical. You're not going to cause any trouble, are you? You won't be going on any protest marches or any demonstrations. You don't have any strong opinions about anything. In fact, you don't have any opinions about anything at all, except, of course, an adherence to the furtherance of yourself and a support for free market capitalism, as if that wasn't a political opinion in itself. But no matter, you can still just about cling to the illusion of yourself as not being political. Unlike all those political activists who waste their money and their weekends to scream and shout and carry placards and go on marches and demonstrations and write articles and join political parties and even have YouTube channels, who seem to be doing such tedious and difficult and expensive and time-consuming and thankless things just for the sake of it. You're not one of those. Your freedom to conduct your financial, free market capitalist life is conditional on you not being an activist. It's conditional on you not rocking the boat. It's conditional on you not challenging the power structure. It's conditional on you supporting the status quo. And it's conditional on you being no more than a good little consumer in the capitalist machine. So long as you're doing that, you think, you'll be left alone to conduct your life as you see fit. It doesn't seem conditional, because you're not actually inclined to do any of that stuff anyway. But it is. Still, you see no problem, because you can't imagine you'd ever be that kind of person. But are you sure about that? Can you be so sure that there would never be any reason as to why you might want to rock the boat? Do you not have the imagination to envisage a situation where you might want to challenge the power structure? Is there no eventuality that might cause you not to support the status quo? No? Well, how about raising the income tax rate from 20 to 40%? That might cost you 15 grand a year, depending on how well you're doing. That might mean that you couldn't pay your bills. How about the interest rate going up from 5 to 15% as a direct result of government policy? That might mean you couldn't pay your mortgage. Would you protest then for all those fellow citizens who suddenly couldn't pay their mortgages? Or would that be too political? Or would you just protest because you couldn't pay yours? Everything is politics, and politics is everything. Despite what you might think, you don't get to opt out. This is, I'll concede, not a brilliant example. Because threats to people's economic well-being are usually incremental. Incremental enough, firstly, just so we don't notice, and secondly, so that the cost of standing up for others far outstrips the benefits of abandoning one's fellow citizens to their fate. Because you wouldn't want to be too political, would you? Perish the thought. But even if you are as self-motivated, I hesitate to say selfish, if you're as self-motivated as that and will always be prepared to throw others under the bus just so that you can get ahead, your finances may still not be safe from forces outside of your control. If you keep abreast of the culture wars on YouTube, which of course you may not, being as you are not political, but if you do, you'll be aware of the deplatforming pogrom in recent months. That began with Alex Jones, but quickly spread to Gavin McGuinness, Milo Yiannopoulos and others, as well as the censoring of Tommy Robinson that has been a very, very long time coming. But then of course, you're not political, so you don't give a shit. Who cares about censorship? Maybe you even agree with it, trusting in the infallible wisdom of those doing the censoring. Well, okay. People being denied their voice has no bearing on your life, at least as you see it. So why should you care? Well, we'll come to that. So you may not care, or even have any opinion on people being denied their speech and their opinions. But what about people being denied their livelihood? Is there anything wrong with that? Myopic and self-serving as you are, can you perhaps imagine that there might just be something unfair about that? I mean, these people are not unsuccessful. They haven't failed. Their livelihoods are not being put in jeopardy because their ideas are not selling in the marketplace of ideas. To put it in a context that might resonate with you. No, these people are being gagged precisely because their ideas are successful. People are buying what they're selling, but what they're selling is a challenge to the established order, and so they must be silenced. But it goes further than that. Silence is not enough for the fashionable fascists of Silicon Valley. Sure, Google and YouTube and Facebook and Twitter and Instagram are doing their bit. They're doing the silencing. But they know that these people will not take this lying down, shut up and go away. They'll find other ways to spread their ideas. So what did the social media mafia do? They phone up their mates at Patreon and PayPal, who they know think just as they do. Refuse to deal with these hate mongers, they say, and shut their accounts. Make it so that they cannot trade. We're not satisfied with shutting these people up. We must remove their ability to make a living. Quite how far this philosophy goes is unclear, but we should assume it might go, absurdly, all the way to boycotting B&Q or Home Depot, just to prevent them from hiring Alex Jones to pick stock in one of their warehouses because he's been hounded out of every other job he's taken. Ridiculous? Of course, but that doesn't mean it won't happen. And in some instances, this is even spread to the credit card companies. Last year, MasterCard forced Patreon to close the account of a guy called Robert Spencer, who ran a website called Jihadi Watch. He was deemed an unacceptable person, and as a consequence was therefore not entitled to earn a living, which appears to be the rationale. Has this got your attention yet? Has it even raised an eyebrow? It should, because it affects you. The reason that MasterCard is so huge and so successful is because we trust them. We trust them to do their job. We trust them to fulfill their obligations. We trust them to facilitate payments without regard to anything else, except the legal requirements to which all of us are bound. We trust them to do their job without judgment. If they didn't do that, we wouldn't trust them. We wouldn't let someone walk off with an item worth £1,000 if we didn't trust the piece of plastic they gave us as payment. Their entire business is based on trust. They wouldn't have a business without it. So let's just imagine what might happen if the credit card companies expand placing judgments on purchases. Let's start with the obvious things that may be deemed unsuitable, inappropriate, or unsociable. A block on purchasing pornography, for example. Although who pays for porn anyway? Maybe the same people who still use normal cabs. How about something that is dear to Americans? Firearms. We don't approve of the right to bear arms. Your BMW? We think that gas-guzzling status symbols are inappropriate in the age of climate change. A Harley then. They're a bit loud, aren't they? A bit antisocial. Now, you're a 30-year-old bloke, not yet weighed down with the responsibilities of family, and you like to play video games. Too violent. We don't approve of the social mores of Grand Theft Auto. In fact, we don't approve of driving too fast. So that's all the driving games out the window, as well as all the violent war ones. Why on earth did you ever imagine we'd leave those alone? We also note, since it is on our database, that you've already bought your suggested weekly intake of alcohol. So we're going to put a block on that, I'm afraid. For your own good, you understand. Cigarettes? No way, are you kidding? And 3 takeaway pizzas this week? I don't think so, do you? And your holiday to the Maldives? Are you aware of the CO2 emissions of a long-haul flight? I'm afraid that it's just too irresponsible, and we'd be held responsible if we allowed it. Many apologies, but there are great deals to be had at Butlins in Skegness or Disney World, just so long as you don't drive, but because you'll be going over your petrol or gasoline ration. And just like a wealthy passenger on the Titanic, you might be tempted to bribe the stewards for a place on a lifeboat. Your money won't help you. Still think cash is inconvenient? Am I perhaps getting your attention yet? Is it beginning to dawn on you that you are subject to this kind of stuff? And that even if you are, in fact, as non-political as you think you are, that your ability to move around the commercial world and make your own purchasing decisions is seriously compromised by this prevailing narrative that says you are not, in fact, capable of making the right decisions for yourself or for society. And that will be true whether you are the most inoffensive, uncontroversial, bland, servile, and compliant goody two-shoes consumer, or whether you're the world's greatest rebel. You're just easier to get in line. So that's the reality of the money situation, whether you choose to see it or not. Your financial freedom, if you want to call it that, is far from guaranteed, and it's increasingly out of your hands. So perhaps you're not too happy about this. Perhaps you don't agree that others should be making your decisions for you. So you might want to express your disagreement. You might want to complain, like you complain when you get shoddy goods or poor service. Because you're quite good at that, as a modern man, you're quite a good consumer. And not being a sucker, you won't accept being treated as one. So you might want to protest. Oh, you politico, you activist. But you can't do that either. Why not? Well, because your freedom to complain, along with your freedom of speech, has been restricted. Now, didn't you notice your freedom of speech was removed with the hate speech laws? There was a debate. It was all over the internet. It was argued that freedom of speech was just a noble sounding anachronism and not fit for the 21st century. The consensus was that people only wanted freedom of speech just so they could spew out the N-word. That was the consensus. Well, it was the consensus after they removed all the troublemakers from the debate who argued that we still needed it. Then there was a consensus. I'm surprised you don't remember. Or were you too busy searching for the best deals to the Maldives? Yeah, so sorry. Time for complaining has passed, I'm afraid. There were a host of other freedoms that were abolished at the same time. I don't suppose you noticed that either. Anonymity, along with privacy, and the freedom of movement went soon after. Privacy, in particular, it was agreed was only wanted by paedophiles. There wasn't much in the way of debate on those ones either, seeing as freedom of speech had already been narrowed. Yeah, narrowed they call it. It wasn't abolished so much as narrowed. You can now say anything you like, so long as it's within these new margins. It's quite tricky to keep up though, as it happens, since those margins keep changing, or narrowing I should say. So long as you keep within those margins, and you keep up, you should be fine. After all, it's a free country. We're not barbarians. What was that? That's not what you call a free country? And that's what you want, is it? Freedom? Well, you never said that at the time. Sadly, the sort of person to whom this rant is directed is unlikely to be listening. He's unlikely to be one of my subscribers, but he is someone that we all know. He is someone who is blithely making his way through life, believing that his path to getting what he wants lies merely in the commercial world. He's wedded to it, to free market capitalism, without realising that his financial freedom will wither and die without the stable, free and liberal society that underpins it. But he's the guy we need to get to, and millions like him. If we don't, they will sleepwalk into tyranny, and they'll take us with them. I've done my best in this rambling post, which I know is too long, it's too rambling and too inept, to try and come up with arguments to make this guy take notice. But it's the best I've got. If you've got better, answers on a postcard, or even in the comments. We can't keep talking to ourselves. With that in mind, as inept as it is, please try and spread it around, or better still, come up with something better.